50 people. So the supervision session on coaching trends for 2023, and we're recording it because we normally get about 50 people that actually watch these recordings on YouTube. So it seems like a useful thing to do. So we've done quite a bit of research, looking at trends, seeing what's available. We've tried to keep it quite global. So quite a lot of things we want to cover today, a bit about Aephoria, some broader trends in life, and then actual coaching trends. And I'm hoping this is what you want to hear. So just really quickly, I wanted to say we've got some fabulous new documents coming in that will be available physically and also through the coaches portal. We've invested hugely in a whole lot of statistical analysis on the reliability and validity of the AIM document, and that's going to be available. It's quite a technical document, but there are a lot of coaches that like that. We've produced a book, which we're now reprinting at the moment, and we'll try and distribute them and get copies to you, called Finding Ourselves. And this is a description of the 72 AIM profiles. It's in a small format, so you can take it to coaching sessions if you're still going to coaching sessions. And for each one of the profiles, there's a description of the experience from the outside and an experience from the inside, and then practices that relate to both the maturity and the Enneagram. And there's a lot more documents that are going onto the coaches portal, including sample reports, and various coaching guides will come out later during the year. So we've got a bit of new IP coming out. Simon, feel free to chip in.
I will.
Accreditation is keeping on going. I think for those that haven't done this, and I don't think there are a lot of you, it's still happening. There's one in March, and the accreditation in March is looking more fully at what it's like to be an in-house coach. So if you're employed in the organization and have to coach within that organization. So that's a more specialist version of level 1 accreditation.
So if any of you know people in organizations who you think might be good candidates to take the accreditation and then be able to use the tool in their systems, then let us know. We're moving more towards that in-house model, actually, for some of our programs.
Yeah. And this is sort of less relevant, but what our business has grown, and we've got different people working with us at different levels. And we want to implement a quality assurance process for our coaches, which is going to include, facilitating with people, one-on-one supervision, and other types of interventions. It's just a very broad outline of what we're going to be doing to try and ensure that coaches that work with us are producing quality work. The whistleblowers, Kate, thank you. So 22 whistleblowers, South African whistleblowers, and by that I mean people who have blown the whistle on people in positions of authority for fraud. In particular, 22 whistleblowers have come through the process. 22 people assessed, feedbacks to 18, and most have completed their 6 sessions. Some are still in process. And we've got an additional 18 more whistleblowers coming through. So if you would like to contribute to the program, we are asking our coaches to take on 6 sessions with a whistleblower. These are very interesting people that you'd never be exposed to before. Interesting people like policemen, but also CEOs and other people that have blown the whistle on fraudulent authorities. And this is our contribution to nation building. So thank you, coaches. And we've had amazing feedback from Whistleblower House. People have been writing many letters of gratitude and It's really been an amazing program. People who normally wouldn't get any support and who are going through like 12 years of court cases, coaching has been incredibly helpful to them. And this, of course, is done for free, thanks to you. So, onto some trends for 2023. So this is from an Accenture report, which we're happy to share with you. But I think, you know, for me, some of that, the big trend here is permacrisis. Permacrisis. People constantly rolling with practical problems, with political problems, with identity problems, with how to get systems to move problems, and more existential questions of how to live a meaningful life and where to position oneself in the world. They talk about fight, flight, and focus as being, and freeze being ways that people cope. And I thought I'd just put this little interesting thing in. So in China, there's this thing called Bailan, which is, we call it go slow in South Africa, but in China, they call it the let it rot movement, where people who are disengaged in the system just slow down and kind of let it rot. They stop fighting to maintain a system. And I think we've seen quite a bit of that, especially in government departments who feel like they are fighting a futile battle. I like this one about social platforms. Don't feel social anymore. And I know my experience of Facebook is I don't see a friend anymore. I just see adverts. And so physical communities and much more tailored online communities coming back. Loss of intangible office benefits. So this is quite a big deal for coaches. All that interpersonal value that people get from interacting. The support, the care, the nurturing, even the arguments, the stimulation. So a lot of intangible office benefits have been lost because really, and I don't know what your experience is of this, but the back to work thing hasn't really worked. People are very reluctant to go back to work once they've tasted flexibility. Increased tension between employer and employee. And in some countries, well, in all countries, are sort of very limited skilled people and the need to find ways to keep skilled people in the workforce because people are leaving. They want flexibility and they want a much broader life. So employees are bargaining much more with their employer. AI and Web3, and then ongoing drive for innovation. So I'm just going to kind of run through these quite quickly. And
Can
then,
I just throw something in? If you want to hear and see and read more about the, well, this guy actually calls it the meta crisis. There's various different terms that are being coined all at once to describe what the hell the world's in at the moment. Check out a guy called Daniel Schmachtenberger. He's got a lot on the web at the moment, but he's got 2 YouTube, interviews, actually, they're interviews with him where he's talking about the meta crisis and many of these elements that you've got on this slide as something that can't be solved at the level that we're working with it at the moment. And it really does endorse maturation and leadership maturation as a possible solution for these complex crises that are all being sold at a technical and disciplinary level and not at a transdisciplinary level, which involves collaboration. And the world's not capable of getting to that level. And his 2-part tome on this is on YouTube. I think part 1's 2.5 hours and the other is like 2 hours 15. So carve yourself out some time, but it's well worth it because these are trends that we're seeing walking into coaching conversations every day. And it's great to be able to talk contextually. And it's a real point of difference for coaches who can speak about the world contextually and how that might be coming into a person's inner world. Schmachtenberger, SCHMA, I'll type it. It's very long. It's even longer than my surname.
Okay, so it's in the chat. Thanks, Simon. Great. So this is a very busy slide, and I apologize for that. But the gist of this is, you know, when you look at humans, they have these transitional points in their lives. And during those transitional points, like, for example, adolescence or middle age or whatever, you know, these transitional points, at those points, they become very vulnerable to opportunism and to clinging on to the past, a kind of a stuckness, or kind of like flowing too much into the future. So in this state of transition, you know, difficult things happen. It's actually quite a dangerous state because things can get in and can influence people in ways that may not serve the greater good. At the moment, we're seeing massive, massive transitions in humans, in organizations, and in countries. So there's a huge amount of flux and transition. And so we've been thinking a lot about coaching in transition and what to do with that because of all the problems around stuckness, fallback, what happens when the truth becomes opaque, what happens when people become scared, how do they control, how does that impact on leadership? And us, the answer that we came up with around this is that, you know, in transition, identities are in flux. And probably the best place to start is with self-reflection for the client to know who they are and what they are, so that they've got some kind of a concrete basis to root themselves in this period of flux. Now, we know that this flux might cause identity changes as well, but our experience suggests that maybe what coaches can do is, instead of focusing on how to flow with the outside world, which is useful, but maybe not a focus, but to strengthen the inner world. Who am I? What do I want? And how do I fit into the world? Rather than coaching particular issues. Just a thought. Any thoughts on that? Anybody coaching transitions? Anybody not coaching transitions? This idea of self-identity becomes even more important. Susan, yeah, hi.
Yeah, but before I head out, this just so resonates for me. And for one, I'm thinking of a client I've been working with for several years, who's in leadership, and it's she wants transition, job change. One thing fell through, another, you know, she works with an NGO. So coming back to her internal works, her internal grounding, and that's been something we've been continuing to develop on. So how is she going to know what her choices will be? You know, how can she ground herself and discern what's calling to her, and what will help engage her, you know, what will fuel her energy. You know, it's a continuing healing process, but it's that internal work, because she's a 9, she identifies as a social 9, so it's so often checking with others and such. So anyhow, that resonates, and it's been part of my journey too. Yeah,
I think for all of us, and as coaches, it is an important thing for us to know as well. Who are we? We might be a bit fluid in our identity, but who are we? How can we ground ourselves in ourselves so that we don't float with the world? Is that making sense?
I think there's a meta narrative above, which is around the transition of civilizations, even. And I've spoken a little bit about this before, around this idea of civilizations having definite periods in them. And there's a lot of research and studies been done on this by people like Joseph Tainter and Sir John Glubb, and more latterly Meg Wheatley. And just noticing that all civilizations, back to the Ottoman Empire and Byzantine Empire and Roman Empire, follow a certain path, and they all plus or minus have 250 years to run in a civilization. And we are in the final stage of the final stage of our civilization, which is called the age of decadence and is characterized by celebrity and consumerism and bent politicians and inequality and political hatred. And it happens every time, and it's happening again now. And the conventional wisdom says we've got 5 to 10 years left before the civilization kind of falls apart, and we enter this massive liminal space of transition between civilizations. And so there's that transition happening as well as all of these other transitions within it. So it's just a mad time. And I know that point gets over accentuated all the time, but it's worth just going back to it. We are working in extraordinary times. And that's useful for coaching clients to know. It's like, it's not me. I'm not the screw up here solely. Actually, I'm being buffeted around by forces that are so big and so powerful and so inevitable. And it can bring a sense of relief to clients sometimes when they realize that it isn't all their fault. And I think that's really important.
Absolutely. And just to throw in after that good point, Simon, there is such a thing as post-traumatic growth. And that's really your job, is how can we help clients make meaning out of this time in their lives and process the trauma and complexity and transitional nature of this time so that they can work through wounds and consolidate their learning and make meaning out of it in a positive way. And that's one huge piece of value that we can add. Some other things, just from our own programs this year, and we ran a lot of programs this year, we found a lot of fallback. Wow. And we were able to link quite a lot of the fallback to social unrest, for example, climate change disasters, loss of meaning, people doing more than one job, all sorts of things. So I think we must kind of expect that this is going to be a year where we're going to see a lot of fallback. We've already spoken a little bit about back to work processes. And, you know, we're seeing a lot of clients who are really grappling with how do we manage people remotely? How do we inspire them? How do we provide them with the intangible benefits of working in a system, even while they're outside our location? And I don't know if some of these are useful or not, but what we've also noticed, which is quite radical, is when we run leadership development processes, the more coaching there is, the greater the maturational shifts. So many clients want to cut out the coaching sessions and use more group coaching opportunities. And we found that that actually slows maturation down more than coaching speeds it up. You've got to have both, but we're starting to get the picture that actually it's the one-on-one that really puts the pedal to the metal. We're seeing a lot more expectation from clients in terms of reporting and showing ROIs, return on investment. Clients are much more informed. Many of them are coaches, and they want to play a stronger role in co-creating programs. So we've seen a lot more clients working with us in a partnering role to develop programs and even coaching programs, rather than them just buying it shrink wrapped and implementing it. And then we still see coaches struggling with self-care, looking after themselves. Any comments? Can I just roll? Can't see you all properly. So some more kind of research. So look at that. The coaching industry is continuing to grow. It's going to reach $20 billion in 2023. There are at least 93,000 coaches in the world. Most of them are in the US. Online coaching platforms, executive coaching market, And so the US coaching market has grown 30% in the last 5 years. So that's been the trajectory for the US. And now we're seeing that kind of major growth in South America, less so Africa. And I was speaking to a coaching business today in the UK, and they were saying that given the economic predictions, they're not quite sure how the market is going to go in the UK. Coaching certification market. This is very interesting. So people offering to certify coaches. Look how big that's become. It's become a major industry all on its own. 1/3 of all Fortune 500 companies use coaches. So this, we're on the back end of the wave. It's growing. Some really good research has come out showing the benefits of coaching. Now, I don't know how they measured this, but here are the results, and you're welcome to get onto the link and have a look. But some real benefits in terms of productivity, recouping of investment. We're seeing that Gen X leaders are wanting more coaching than the other generations. They want external coaches. Yeah, coaches, so people who've been coached, they feel more nurtured and cared for by the company. And this, I suppose, is very helpful in terms of finding ways to build relationships between staff members and organizations. And then there's a massive desire there. 90% of companies think managers should act as informal coaches. So this whole coaching market, coach accreditation market, all of that is only going to expand. And then there's the issue of certification. So most people want certification. There's quite a lot of discussion around whether the ICF is the way to go or not. And in our experience, once clients get a feel for you and they like you, the certification issue becomes less important. But I think it's something everyone has to decide based on their market. I know some local coaches have recently gone through ICF accreditation, and it has been quite a journey. But I think it's worth evaluating. Simon? You want to add anything there? Anyone else want to add anything? Yeah, Vicky, hello.
Hello, good to see you all.
Good to see
I have a
you.
question for you. I'm curious about the stat of 88% of people who received coaching felt it affected their feelings about their company.
Yeah.
You'd be able to say more about what that means, what those feelings might be.
Yeah, I think the feelings, so the actual research, I especially looked in there to see if it was only positive feelings or if it was mixed. And my experience of this would be that a lot of people do see investment in coaching as a way that the organization sort of cares for them and would enjoy that. And we've also noticed that in some coaching situations, coaching means people leave. So I think it can't be blanket one way or another.
And maybe that's okay. Both are okay, right?
Yeah.
And we have this conversation in organizations quite a lot. We say this is a maturation program and people are going to come through and look at their lives and go, oh, maybe I didn't want to be an accountant for a large multinational corporation. And so I'm not going to be anymore. And they leave. And the company goes, well, maybe it's okay. We want people who want to be here. And if they don't want to be here, then that's all right. Yeah. So it needs to be a bad thing that it affects their feelings so much that they want to leave. Sometimes it works for everyone.
Yeah, thank you for that. Kate, did you want to?
Yeah, Julia, I wanted to ask about the accreditation. I need to move up to the next stage with ICF. And if ICF is not what people are favoring, what is?
So this is interesting, and also, you know, it comes from a particular vein of research.
Mm.
You know, I think what the research was saying was that accreditation with a valid school is enough. And there are some clients that only want ICF. And I think it's going to be a personal decision, you know, get onto the ICF website, see what it takes to become accredited. Some of the practices that they require are useful, whether you ICF or not. Like, for example, watching your hours or making sure you continue your education. I don't think you necessarily have to be ICF. I think a good school is good, and a decently long course that has some kind of evaluation at the end.
Thanks.
Okay.
I had one additional question.
Yeah. Sorry.
Going back to, I think it was on the slide labeled some numbers, a really interesting stat about the global coaching industry expected to be valued at 20 billion this coming year, or this year, I guess it is. Was curious what it was last year.
I don't know, but I do know that it grew enormously. I don't know what it was. I don't know. I'm sorry.
I could probably just look that up. Thank you.
Yeah, you know, it's quite amazing how much information actually is out there.
Yeah, I can just look it up.
Yeah, thank you, Vicky.
Average yearly growth expected of 6.7%. Average yearly growth expected of 6.7%.
Great. Thank you.
In 2019, it was 15 billion. There we go.
Great. Thank you, Simon.
Pleasure. Google, my friend. Alistair.
Yeah, thanks. I'm curious, in your research, did you pick up any research around or data around coaching and diversity and inclusion? Because there was a bit of a buzz a year or two ago. Has that died down coming into 23, or it's still the same?
It's still there. It's still there. It's still underdeveloped. I think it still has to happen. I think it's a very underdeveloped part of a coach's repertoire. And I think it speaks perhaps to coaches' difficulty in that realm as well. Personally, if I was going to do a DEI intervention, I would include DEI-based coaching, because that can help people deal with stuff that's very personal and possibly tricky to do in a group. And that's incredibly useful. We've done a few little things like that called exploring my racial hotspots. And we do like an interview with people to try and highlight issues or beliefs that might reduce people's capacity for diversity and inclusion. Simon, I know you know a lot about this.
Well, I mean, we're doing a couple of big DEI interventions at the moment, and there's a couple of things that spring to mind. The first is we always build in EXCO DEI coaching, because EXCO have to champion the diversity initiative, and so they kind of need to know their worldview and inner world around it, and a lot of it's inner world based coaching. So what are my biases and ways of seeing diversity that could impact on and shape the way that we roll this out into the organization? And I think the other thing that we're putting in now more and more is that the DEI professionals and teams themselves are under such enormous pressure to deliver magic quickly. And so we're also finding that increasingly we're coaching the DEI function that has to roll out the DEI initiatives, because they're under such pressure to get things done and to get results. So it's going in a number of different angles, I think.
It should really be part of coaching conversations, because it's part of preparing leaders for the world as it is. Yeah. Yeah, a couple more trends that I thought were interesting. If we can move on, I'm just worried about time. You cool? Okay. So still use of coaching apps, but I haven't heard as much about them as I thought I would have by now. So I think they've been largely behavioral and often used for lower levels rather than executives. But what we are seeing is a massive increase in group coaching. And I suppose this is once again an attempt to put some of the intangibles, you know, the human intangibles back into the workplace, to build networks and to have people interact. And also because there's a cost issue here. Group coaching is cheaper. Quite a lot about the use of cookie cutter approaches. So sort of like, you know, coaching for hypos, you know, those kinds of shrink wrap kind of ideas. Clients are wanting much more integrated, strategic, culture-focused interventions rather than cookie cutter approaches. We're still seeing a lot of stuff coming through, like little one-off things like courageous conversations and those kinds of things, but smaller interventions that fit into a broader coaching program. High-touch hybrid programs, so programs that have lots of support around administration, have people being mailed, send videos, having coaching, being invited to groups. So lots and lots of touch points in coaching programs. We're seeing more and more of that. Greater specialization. So yeah, the variety of more specialist coaches is becoming quite extreme. People that are very specifically working in very niche markets, for example, only work with politicians or that vote Liberal, for example. You know, very specialist. More esoteric approaches, people much more accepting. I mean, one of the things that I've seen quite a bit of is actually entheogens and the use of different kinds of psychotropic drugs. Not, you know, in some not all countries, but in some countries, you know, coaches that specialize in integrating experiences, or for particular sectors that have an interest in this, then, you know, there's often a lot of coaches working in this way. Longer sales cycles. Longer sales cycles. And this is due to a number of factors, but the market is becoming much more educated and working and want to work more in a partnership with the coach. So getting them kind of ready for the organization, integrating them within the culture, positioning the intervention and integrating it within leadership development interventions. All of these complex bits and pieces are becoming more integrated, and the sales cycle is getting longer. Yeah.
And more global programs, which is adding to the sales cycle. So we did a program last year where that combined participants from the very west coast of the US all the way through to Australia and lots in between. And so we were running 2 cohorts on the same day, one in the morning, one at night. So across time zones, and then to kind of cost that and land it and do the design, it takes an enormous amount of time. And that was a 6-month sales cycle to land that program, just because of its complexity. But they want one hit, let's get everyone, and they're all over the world. So that really adds to the cycle time.
Yeah. I was chatting to this guy today who's in our field, and he was just saying he's starting to think a little bit of like, okay, so this kind of thing is going to take a year to 18 months to sell. This kind of a thing is going to take 6 months. This kind of a thing is going to take 2 months. And to kind of think about how to position your different initiatives so that you can earn a living in a consistent way. Quite an interesting new challenge. But I think the thing there for me is to not lose hope with clients when things take a long time. They are working through so much complexity, and sort of a simple sign-off is no longer a simple sign-off. Yeah, increased need for coaches to understand the businesses they work in and to be much more strategic. So we're seeing lots more interest in psychological work that contributes to strategy. So for example, looking at the executive team and saying, well, actually, are you the right people to lead it? What can you develop that kind of relates to your strategy? Or if you want to take a values-based approach, what kind of level of maturity is going to be able to support that in the leadership team? And, you know, working much more into the strategic directives of the organization. So all of the interventions are sort of part strategy, part coaching, part facilitation. And then market consolidation. So it's, you know, there are a lot of independents working in the coaching field, and a lot more people joined the coaching profession under COVID, when the relationship between themselves and the organization started to fall apart and people became more directed to support their own life. But what's happening now is that there's some consolidation taking place. And it's taking place often because organizations are needing a lot more administration. They want more care and high touch. They're complex procurement processes, payment terms up to like 60, 90 days, which is difficult for an independent to cope with. And often they want a more integrated kind of approach with the coaching and leadership development. So these requirements are difficult for coaches on their own. But there are a lot of coaching networks which support coaches to keep moving. And I think that's probably where we're going, is to these groupings. And so coaches have these flexible relationships with organizations and figure out a way to operate in this consolidating market. Any comments about that? Interesting. It just means, you know, for those coaches that are working on their own, you know what admin is required, and you know how complex procurement processes are, and you know cash flow stories. So I think this kind of makes sense, but it does make it more difficult for independents.
Is the suggestion then, given that there is a requirement for higher touch, more integrated processes, and time, to simply put, time required, how are you suggesting that we, as independent coaches, think through our pricing model to account for this trend?
I've got a slide coming up on pricing model, but I think that the basic thing is to stay in a network. And to use the network to get work, to deliver larger pieces of work, or to find a way to share the admin. And I think let's have a look at the pricing. So this was just some of the ways we've seen people price. So the usual stuff, selling in packages, or other people sort of working twice a month on an ongoing basis. We're seeing people staying in coaching relationships for years. So some of the pricing models are in packages or one-on-one. And in some countries, and like we've seen this in Dubai and the USA, very senior coaches are getting 10% of senior leaders package. So enormous sums. Then we're seeing primarily in the US and a little bit in South Africa, where coaching companies, so if there's more than one, or coaching networks, selling like 100 sessions to a client, and then the client distributes that as is necessary throughout the organization. And from what I hear, that's quite a sustainable model to work with, because it kind of guarantees the coach's income and sort of stabilizes the relationship so you can actually do some work. Rates are still very dependent on who is paying, the level of the coachee, whether you're working through a coaching organization that takes a cut. And the cuts vary hugely, very, very, we've come across people that take 50, 60% or 20, 30%. So it's very varied depending on how much of the process the company looks after. So we've seen US exec coaching rates up to 1,500 Rand. But what we've noticed, especially with big corporates, is the 60, 90 days payment thing, which is tricky. In the UK, executive coaching up to £2,000 an hour. And I checked this with my guy in England, and he said actually a lot of that is old ex-CEOs who are going in and charging those rates. So they're better trained as CEOs than coaches. And so it's kind of like it sounds like a bit more like a mentorship role. And South African executive coaching sort of regularly up to 8,000 Rand an hour, depending on who you're working with. Life coaching rates are lower, rates for supervision are also lower. So it's hugely broad, hugely, hugely broad. But I think for me, the message here is get properly trained, get properly supervised, build your community, and charge proper rates. And you're probably still going to have to diversify your work, coaching and facilitation.
I wonder whether that, Vicky, was kind of behind your question. Kate, I know you had your hand up as well, but just to go back to your question, Vicky, is that one of market positioning that you're asking there? Like, how do you position yourself in the market and have your price point reflect your market positioning?
Yes. Yes, that's where I was headed. And I think depending, I think it goes back to what was said earlier, is this is all so situational and dependent on the company and how much they require. And if one goes into a company and they expect it to be a lower touch, but it actually is higher touch, and we've set our rates at this particular place, how do we protect ourselves in advance? I don't know if there's an answer to that. It's more of a, I guess my thought is once you're in the organization and then we realize how much more they're expecting, it can get tricky. But I think maybe just designing up front and thinking through it and talking through it and getting to know them very well before placing the package in front of them might be a way.
Yeah.
Totally. And it can work in reverse as well, where the company says, oh, we're going to keep you so busy, we're going to throw you 100 coaching clients. So won't you just give us a decent volume related rate on those? So you go in at a volume related rate and then 20 people come through rather than 100. And you're still expected to honor that volume related rate. So a lot of it's in the contracting up front. There's a lot of safeguarding that can be done there, I think. And volume related bands around pricing are quite useful there.
Yeah.
I think hours at certain rates, and there's a diminishing rate as the volume gets bigger.
Yeah, I think it helps to be in a network also and have, some emotional backing around what can be delivered for what price.
Kate, you had your hand up. Have we missed the opportunity?
It was back on the other slide. I was intrigued by the comment of entheogens being used in coaching, and whether have you actually seen that in South Africa?
No, I've
Okay.
seen that in San Fran.
Okay. Yeah. Should be
No,
heading here.
Oh,
But I
wait,
don't
hang
think
on.
it's quite
No,
here yet.
yeah,
I've heard of it in South Africa.
Have you?
And now, I mean, you know, we're looking at the decriminalization of MDMA in the US probably this year.
Yeah.
There are, I mean, you'll know, Kate, I'm sure, a number of certainly therapy programs specifically for use of psychedelics in therapeutic settings.
Okay, so it's coming.
It's
Yeah.
definitely, I mean, that's the next sort of like big S-curve wave. If you wanted to get on something for like 5 years' time, if you pardon the pun, then that would be huge.
Great, thank
Yeah.
you.
yeah. Yeah, I've seen that in Silicon Valley. Okie dokie. Yeah, just kind of like we've already spoken about accreditation here. But so we don't need to talk about that again. What I think a lot of coaches don't do is get proper supervision. And that means they're not learning, they are not being challenged, and their own growth might even be undermined. And I think a useful kind of rule of thumb is work with someone who's going to work with you deeper than the level that you're working in coaching. So maybe look in the world of therapists or coaches that work deeper or more existentially, or someone that's going to build your inner world and help you to reflect on what you bring into the coaching process. Simon?
No, I'm stuck on that ICF thing a little bit. So there's a colleague, mate of mine, who's quite a sort of super coach in the UK and quite senior in ICF as an officer in there. And he's also quite mature. And recently he ran a course and he did a feedback session as part of the course as the trainer. And a couple of the delegates picked him up on the fact that he missed 4 of the ICF competencies during a feedback session. And he just kind of throws his hands up now and goes, it's just such a piece of shit, this framework stuff, because it really constrains the coach. If you have to hit these metrics in a feedback session. So for the more mature coaches, I think ICF's becoming an increasing problem because it constrains and keeps you in a framework that otherwise you might expand outside of and be able to do much deeper work with a client. So it's a slightly controversial view around ICF. It's very structured and sometimes too structured for the more potent, mature coaches, I think. Okay.
Cool. And then just sort of one more slide, and then we can have a more loose discussion. So the one thing that came through in all of the literature was this funny thing, your online presence and how very, very important it's becoming. And, you know, I just sort of thinking through all of the things that coaches now have to do aside from coaching. And here's another one. So referral is still the main way in which coaches get work. But people use websites to verify a referral. And so it's a kind of a part 2 of all sales. So, you know, the importance of having a website and a track record. And, you know, this article was saying, actually, you can't just have a track record of coaching clients. You need to also have speaking events, things that you've written, blogs. It's just the development of one's track record is absolutely critical on your website. And also mailing your community to make sure that people are referring you and, reminding them that you exist. And when I look at some of the coaches I know's online presence, I can see it's actually quite limited. And, I know that coach is like 20 years in the business, but their website looks like something developed, as if they've only been coaching for 6 months. So I think this is something we really do have to take quite seriously when we're working on our own as coaches and also in organizations. So I thought I would add that. So any comments, any thoughts that you want to, I know we zoomed through that, but you can have a copy of the presentation if you'd like that.
Yeah, I'll venture a thought, Julia. So I think from my own perspective, I'm quite far away from, where the content of this presentation is. How would you recommend someone gets into coaching? So specifically, work in a corporate environment, referring back to what Simon said about in-house programs, as a person working in a corporate, how could we get more involved? What would be the next step to take in that?
Lovely question. Thank you. So we know the organization you work for supports coaching. And we also saw that figure there that people think managers and leaders should be coaches as well. And so I would take that to your in-house person. I don't know who it would be, leadership, development, training, learning and development, I don't know. And get them to support you in that way. There is so much choice about how to get trained. And sometimes it's useful to just get into a community and roll with them and see how that goes. I don't want to self-promote our course, but our course.
I will then.
You do it. You do it. You're much better. Enneagram 3, yay!
Chris, I will unashamedly say, join us. Come on our accreditation in March, and come into the community. But there are others around doing similar thing. But our work a bit of old. But it is kind of a really good tried and tested way is to find a slipstream. And in coaching, like in many industries, and it sounds a bit predatory, but it's really good to hunt in packs. Find a good pack.
All right. Okay. Yeah, that's some good advice.
Yeah.
Vicky, thank you for that little endorsement in the chat box there. Kind.
Yeah.
Anytime. It's good stuff.
Yeah. I'm just thinking about that particular system. Find some colleagues that want to do the same. And link it to strategy, how this can help deal with some of the back to work issues and all of the other malaises in corporates at the moment.
Yeah, I will do. I'll look at that. Thanks.
Kate.
Oh, Kate, your Kate. Oh, there.
Your courses are phenomenal, and they've changed my working career and life and added hugely to what I can bring to my coaching. Because I did a proper coaching qualification, like an 18-month one, and then have added your level 1 to 4 on top. And absolutely phenomenal. So Chris, I mean, I'm not, being shooting straight from the heart here. They are phenomenal and very practical. And so my question now is, what's next? Because I love learning and my curiosity is just so piqued, and I'm wondering if you have any pearls of wisdom to offer. What comes possibly next? Are you planning on offering anything more, or any thoughts?
There's some new product stuff in the pipeline, which will lead to some more learning opportunities, I think. But I mean, the other thing, Kate, is to to get into coach supervision.
Mm.
That's something, and coach supervision around AIM specifically. That's something that
Supervising coaches. I don't know if
Right.
I'm ready for that.
well, you might be being a little self-deprecating there, Kate. I think you're totally ready for that.
Okay.
That opens up a whole new world.
Okay.
Supervising the coaches too. Yeah.
I've had a little bit of exposure to very post-conventional companies recently. And so now we're trying to kind of humanize the workplace. And then what happens after that process is completed? Where's the next wave of work coming from for us? And my suspicion is, when the whole organization gets very post-conventional, very overly mature and less connected to the pragmatics of running a business, I think that there's going to come in a whole new, much more pragmatic, accountability-based kind of way of coaching, which is going to try and pull all these post-conventional people down into structures that enable businesses to grow. Now, I know that sounds very abstract, but we've seen that in a couple of businesses, that sort of consciousness businesses that have been set up, particularly to expand consciousness, done very well, like $1 million businesses working globally, and then reach the stage where they need to have more structure and more of a, sort of a return to a profit motive, for want of a better word. So I would keep my eye out on that lot. And we're seeing it happen locally. I've seen it in a couple of businesses in Cape Town, consciousness businesses that actually invest in our work, but are sort of slightly floating off the earth. And I think some more pragmatic coaching might be useful for those guys. So Vicky, for supervision, are you suggesting? Yeah, get yourself supervised, definitely. And also, if it works for you, get into supervision groups with other coaches. Because I think the case study thing is really, really useful. And I've had quite a lot of debate with an ICF supervisor. So I think that's also maybe useful to talk about now. So your choice of supervisor needs to be informed by what you want to do in coaching. So if you get an ICF supervisor, they're going to give you tips around how to behave in the coaching situation in order to achieve an outcome. Different kinds of coaching do different things. We come from an existential background. So in an existential approach, we spend a lot of time with the coach asking how they feel about the client and how that informs how they want to or don't want to support the client. So in a sense, we're coaching the coach more rather than coaching coaching to solve the problem. So there's much more of a coaching of the coach going on instead of coaching the coach to coach and solve a problem. And I think that's useful because it builds self-reflection. And that means that we have less chance of getting trapped by a client. A classic example is I once worked with somebody who's borderline and very, very emotional all the time. And then I was less experienced as a coach. And so I kept jumping into the feelings, thinking, yay, let's go with the feelings. So I took it to coaching supervision, and my supervisor said, Julia, we can't have both of you in the river. Who's going to haul the other one out? You can't both get into the river. And so those kinds of interventions are hugely useful. So like, how are you in the coaching session? What feelings come up? Are you envious of your client? Do you pity your client? Is there racial tension? Do you feel you have to be politically correct? All of those things are much more useful to explore than simple steps and behavioral processes, I think. But you must make your own choice. Yeah.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Any other questions about that? Or comments?
I just want to say it's very useful to have it all like laid out as you have done for us. And I'm really resonating with those trends and I'm experiencing them. That feels very relevant for what I'm encountering in this market. Yeah. So thank you.
Thank you, Kate. For me, it just seems like, our sector's been a bit floaty for a while. The world is now floaty. We need to get structured, train properly, build properly, contract properly, take our place in the world in a proper way. And I think that's what's sort of coming through. And if we don't, we risk not actually delivering professionally and becoming a little bit on the side of this profession. So thank you. Simon, any last word from you?
I'm curious about that first conversation that we had, and a couple of people missed it. We went off into a breakout and just thought about how we were as coaches and humans in 2022. And I suppose I'm curious about how you feel you want to be in 2023, which is different. Whether anything pops up for people. Because we asked the question before we looked at the market and the opportunities and the trends and all of that. Does stuff shift at all with some of this information and insight? How you want to work, where you want to work, with whom you want to work, on what you want to work.
I can go. I think in 2022, I'll share that part first because I was not here for it. I think in 2022, with the main project I was working on, the main coaching project I was working on, I was very involved. I feel as a coach, I was standing on the model, yes. However, because I was in a corporate setting with a very specific corporate culture and energy, I felt I needed to show up differently as my normal coaching style, just a bit. And in 2023, after hearing all of this, after hearing all the trends and better understanding where things are going, I believe there's no time to get lost or swept up in the system. It's about staying grounded, keeping my feet on the ground, understanding my secret sauce or my competitive advantage, however we want to put it, and staying true to that now more than ever, rather than getting kind of tousled around. And one last thing I'll say, in this corporate structure, I felt that I showed up so differently based on who I was coaching. That's part of getting your footing. Again, obviously using Enneagram to guide me in the process. I do feel like I was different in each case. And I don't know if that is okay or not. Not that I'm asking for permission, but I guess I'm more curious around is it better for me to, and all of us really as coaches, to stay firmly planted in who we are as coaches versus having a notably, there being a notable shift in how we are with a particular individual.
It's a good question. Or in a particular organizational system, because that can also impact how we show up. Culture of the system gets in, as you say. I like the idea of fluidity around who I'm with. And whilst there are certain cornerstones of how I work, you know, and all the coaching research and the therapeutic research bears this out. It's the most transformational thing about coaching or therapy is the relationship. It's not the tools, it's not the techniques, it's not the school of thought, it's, you know, not the courses we've gone to, it's the connection. And so I think anything that helps build the connection brings the outcomes. So fluidity for me is really useful.
I like the fluidity thing, and I think there's something about knowing who you are. And, you know, I've had to deal with my stroppy personality and accept that it's just stroppy and it's going to come out. And sometimes it can be useful. It can be experienced as slightly fresh and antagonistic. That can be useful. But also that I need, you know, to be fluid around it. And I think it's like, you know, what is your special skill? Because not everyone, I think, can coach everyone. I think there's some people that just work better together, and or maybe better at a certain life stage. So, you know, I find like there's certain maturity levels that are much easier coaching, and they relate more consistently to my personality. And to have fluidity, I mean, it's a complex question, because I suppose that's the sort of existential question, being for oneself while at the same time being for others. And what's the ratio and how do you manage that? The older I get and the more experienced I get, the more I realize some of the rougher sides of my personality are useful in coaching. And although they might be startling at times to clients, sometimes they're useful. And trying to be different from who I am doesn't really serve me or the client. Sometimes my brutish authenticity can help people want to go the same way, or make them run a mile. Then maybe it's not the right, I don't know. So there you go. Simon, Enneagram 3, Julia 8, fluidity, inner, outer. What's the relationship we comfortable with? Excuse me. Lovely question. Any last questions before we close?
If I may, I just shoot.
Yeah, shoot.
Can you hear me? All right. All right. Thanks, Julia. What I realized about Mkhoza, especially 2022, used to talk a lot and trying to bombard the clients or the participants with all the information and knowledge that I have. And I feel that after that, I felt that I have done my best. And the only thing that people will feel, they are just overwhelmed and they don't know where to start. And the challenge with the Enneagram that I've attended was to discover myself by listening more. And I don't have to talk all the time. If I can just listen, and there's too much knowledge in listening, and I don't have to interject all the time, just to give people my own perspective about life. And it was difficult because when you have the only child syndrome, that you want to talk all the time because you're excited to listen to your own voice all the time. You fall in love with your own voice and with your own opinion. And that comes with the nice package of being humble. You have this humility, the faith humility. So Instagram kind of opened up and I was in the theater and it was a shock for the first time. And it didn't only help me, also there was a transition in my family also because I want to talk and I miss a lot. And that as it may, it has helped me also to understand other people and to respect other people's opinion. And so when I see myself in the mirror, I see a different person because the person that you met in 2019 is not the same person. And when you are told who you are by other people, it kind of frustrates you because you are so used in getting affirmation from other people. And it's difficult also when you come to the client because you may lose the client, not because the client is difficult, it's because you don't want to go to the level of your client. And because of that, you find that you can't deal with this kind of personality. And it's because you don't listen. That's all I want to say. Thanks.
Beautiful. Thank you, Mkhoza. I certainly could learn from you. I really need to focus on shutting up. And to that end, I want to say thank you for coming today. It's a small group and we hope to build some momentum this year. As I said earlier, we get about 50 watches on YouTube of these supervisions. So not bad. And we'll just keep going. And good luck for 2023. And thank you so much for coming and sharing your experience and your views.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, Julia. Thanks, Simon.
Thank you. The next session is 3 ways of giving the feedback using the aim, and I'm going to do it, not Lucille, for 2 weeks' time. Yeah. Thank you so much. Lots of love.
Thanks so much.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Stop the recording. There, stop.